Hi, Sherry Truler with Red Apple Auctions. Today we are going to learn about item descriptions, specifically writing item descriptions that your guests are going to refer to for full details. Sometimes people think that item descriptions are going to be part of the slideshow that's happening behind the auctioneer when the auctioneer is on stage. No, that is not where we're putting all the details about the item package. Nor are we usually putting it in the displays on the table, although that's a great place to put them. It's just that very often I see that those displays are small and they can't accommodate everything that needs to be described. So where are we going to put these? We're going to put these in catalogs, and we're going to put these in online bidding platforms, your mobile bidding platforms. If that's where you're referring people, that's where it needs to be. If you're referring them to the catalog, that's where it needs to be, or both, and both. If you're using both, it needs to be in both of those places. Full item descriptions. Now there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I came up with 6 things that your item description needs to have in it. Number 1, a title. Does not need to be a cutesy title, although there are some groups that do cutesy titles, very cutesy titles. I don't mind that as long as we have a descriptive title next to it. So for instance, if I say a romantic getaway, what does that mean? To some couples, that might be like going on a rock climbing expedition for the weekend, right? I mean, for others, it's going to be spending time in wine country. It's totally up to the individual as to whether or not that's going to be romantic. So I'd rather see for a title something like 3 nights at a Shenandoah bed and breakfast. That to me is a descriptive title. Then the guest, the buyer, can decide whether it's romantic or not, kind of how it's described. Now that said, I'm going to include some examples in the video here so you can see. This is a group that does some outstanding cutesy titles, and then right underneath it, they put the real title. So for instance, Seize the Day in Bali, and seize is in quotation, and it's S-E-A-S. Seize. And then the real title is 5 Nights at the W Bali, Seminyak with daily breakfast for 2 and $2,500 American Airlines gift card. Okay, what's another one? Home Sweet Rome is the cutesy title. The real title is 6 Nights in Italy, 3 nights at the Westin, Excelsior Florence, 3 nights at the W Rome, and $1,000 American Airlines gift card. Oh, plus a case of Pinot Noir. Can't beat that. So that's an example of cutesy along with real titles. Another reason that I like real titles, besides helping the guests out, is it helps you out. How many times have I been sitting in a meeting and we are talking with the client about an item and they said, oh, I think we sold this 4 years ago. I can go back in history, and because I changed the names of the titles to be what I sold, not the cutesy name, I can find it and I can say, oh yeah, it was 3 nights at the W. And we also had a donation of wine from Frank. Oh yeah, that's right. We had that donation from Frank. We should ask him for another donation this year. So it helps in that sense too. It helps remind you of what was sold instead of a cutesy title. You'll never remember what you sold when you say a romantic getaway. 4 years down the road, never going to remember it. But if you are specific, you'll have a point at which you can go back and find it. Number 2 is the description piece of it. The description is where you've got the meat of the donation. Again, I'd avoid anything too cutesy. If you say a fantastic kitchen, what does that mean? Tell me it's a newly remodeled kitchen, right? Tell me it's, if it's important, although I can't imagine it would be for an auction item, but it's got Bosch appliances, or, tell me something specific, and then the buyer can determine whether or not that is important to them. Some things that you can do if your descriptions get too long, I like using Boldface. I'll throw an example up to show you how one group does it. They put anything that is contributed to the package from a donor in boldface. Nice. Another thing that you can do, which I love, are bullet points. Again, don't need to be super superlatives in these bullet points. An example of what you could do is you could have a short 2-3 sentence description at the top, and then the bullet points. 2 seats on the glass, mutually agreeable caps game, includes parking, 4th bullet point, includes food and beverage at the 2 lounges. Quickly scannable for your buyer to look at. So I like those kinds of descriptions. Number 3, Make sure that you include restrictions. So restrictions need to be the expiration of the package. When does this thing expire? Have you ever had a buyer who 3 years down the road tries to redeem an auction package? I know of people who've had to deal with that. You put an expiration on it, it closes the deal. Now, if you aren't including expirations individually on your packages, at the least put them in your auction rules. If you aren't doing auction rules in your catalog, that's a subject for another day, but we would like to have auction rules in the catalog because that is kind of the overarching rules of the auction. So you might say something like, any item that does not have any expirations tied to it, the expiration is automatically 1 year from tonight. Covers your bases in that sense. But gosh, other restrictions can be, you know, whether or not you've got kids that are allowed in the house or on the trip. Or for instance, if the package requires extra costs, if you are selling a Caribbean vacation and it's going to cost an extra $100 per day when the buyer goes to make that reservation, you want to put that into the restrictions so that guests see that up front. We don't want to try to surprise people. We want people to know up front what they're getting. That makes you feel better about what you're selling and makes the buyer feel more confident in what they're buying. Restrictions, number 3. Number 4 is donors. You put your donors. Who are your donors? Sometimes the donor, it says anonymous. Sometimes the donor has a name of a person or a company. Sometimes it will say made possible by. We like to use that when it is a consigned item because a consignor doesn't technically donate the trip. They are letting you use their trip and you're buying it from them. Now, you're buying it from them. So it's made possible by this consignor, but it's not really a donation. So instead of saying donor, you might say made possible by. But there's other things that people use, courtesy of, special thanks to. Instead of donor, you might say those if you like that better. 5th thing to include in your item description, value, fair market value. I'm going to include a link to a 2018 article I wrote about fair market value in item descriptions. Didn't come from me, came from what I learned at conventions. According to what I learned, the IRS says you have to include it before the guest raises their hand, meaning that putting it on the receipt is not enough. So I'll let you debate that internally as to what you think about that, but I'll include the link below. And the other thing about including value is that I think most people underestimate the value of items. They don't overestimate. They don't realize that that Airbnb does rent for $5,000 for 5 nights. They don't know. They just don't know. So they bid accordingly. And if you tell them what the value is, then my experience has been that they'll bid accordingly higher. Then finally, a nice to have, maybe not a need to have, but is a photo or photos of the package. If you are doing this in a catalog, you may or may not be able to put a photo with it. If you're doing it in an online mobile bidding, you usually are able to include at least some photos. The photos are really important for your slideshow to kind of bring this full circle. That's what I talked about at the beginning of this little bit. But I talked about the slideshow. You certainly want to have photos up there in the slideshow because you're selling the sizzle at that point. You're selling the sizzle and you want people to see what it is that they're going to be experiencing. Another place for photos might be on your displays on the table. Again, a lot of that just depends on space. I'm seeing a lot of shrinkage in what we have to work with anymore. But if you've got an opportunity to put photos there, that's a good place for them. So if you got a photo, you can tuck it into the catalog. Hey, great. It's kind of a nice to have, not an absolute need to have, but it is a nice to have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Titles, descriptions, restrictions, donors, values, and photos. That is it. If this was helpful, hit the like button or the subscribe button. Either one works. I am slowly updating all of my content from my blog and making them into videos. So you'll be alerted if you subscribe the next time that I upload a video. And of course, every time you hit like or subscribe, that shoots the algorithm a bit higher so that other people who are searching for fundraising auction information are able to find it. So much appreciation if you do that. My name is Sherry. For other information, redappleauctions.com is the place that you can find me. As always, hey, good luck to you in your fundraising gala.